Pope Francis is headed to Egypt, only a few weeks after suicide bombers murdered almost 50 Egyptian Christians celebrating Palm Sunday Mass. What does he hope to accomplish, and why Egypt has become a front line for debates around tolerance and religious freedom for the entire Middle East? This is Perspectives, the weekly edition. Hello and welcome to Perspectives, the weekly edition. I'm Sebastian Gomes. Today we're looking ahead to Pope Francis's visit to Egypt, and what a timely visit it is. Egypt is an extremely important country politically in the region, and it's home to millions of Coptic Christians, the largest Christian community in the entire Middle East. But Egypt is in a precarious situation, having recently imposed a 3-month nationwide state of emergency in the wake of 2 deadly attacks on Christian churches on Palm Sunday. Today we'll look at the reality facing Egyptians, especially the Christian minorities, and we'll discuss Pope Francis's highly anticipated visit at the end of April. We're joined in studio by a frequent guest on Salt and Light Television. Hétu is National Director of the Catholic Near East Welfare Association here in Canada. CNEWA is a papal agency for humanitarian and pastoral support that works through and with the Eastern Catholic churches to identify urgent needs and implement solutions. Their extraordinary work is a lifeline for the poor throughout the Middle East, Northeast Africa, India, and Eastern Europe. And you can learn more about CNEWA and donate here in Canada at cnewa.ca, or if you're in the United States, at cnewa.org. Carl, thanks a lot for joining us today, and welcome back to Salt and Light Television.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's go back to the attacks on April 9th. The world was devastated to see this. Obviously, the Egyptian Christians were devastated by this. Almost 50 people killed. What's the latest? How are the Christians responding or coping with this tragedy?
Well, unfortunately, this attack was not the first one. And unfortunately as well, the Christians are used to those. If you recall, just before Christmas, there was one attack as well in the great capital in Cairo. And there's many other attacks throughout Egypt that's taking place regularly, monthly. Not that the Christians don't get along with the majority of the Muslims, but they are in Egypt a small group of fanatics associated with the Muslim Brotherhood and the Salafists that do not want a country that will welcome Christians. And so they are using any occasions to attack them. And so unfortunately the Christians, even though they most of them will live in a sense of normalcy, they know they're right there in the back. Somebody could be there arriving and hitting the grand coup, if you prefer. And that's a bit what was attempted there. They attacked one parish, a small one in Taunton, first, thinking it will draw the attention there and do the grand coup where Patriarch Tawadros was present
in
and hit him. And it did not work for one good reason. Some courageous security guards that are guarding most of the church on big days like Palm Sunday or Epiphany or Christmas stopped this guy right at the door. And they were killed. So we don't talk about the courage of those people to stop those killers, but they were killed too, innocent people. And so they become martyrs in the church. And so they know that's the way it is. It's a sacrifice that they need to do, but the price at the end will be a better Egypt. And I think with what's happening now with the Pope going to Egypt is also a very important moment for them, and they all know it.
I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the relationship on the ground between the Christian communities and the Muslim communities, because on the outside, sometimes, all we focus on or all we see in the news especially is the negative. But how did the local Muslim communities respond that we know of after these attacks or in the wake of these kinds of attacks?
Well, most Muslims would react with sadness, because it's their brothers and sisters, Egyptians, that are being attacked unfairly. And I've been to Egypt, I've been to rural Egypt, small villages, where Christians and Muslims get along well. You know, a lot of Christians have what we call a duty. They serve in terms of their school, for the handicapped. They have all kind of learning centers to create jobs. They have other kind of health clinics, all kind of services that helps the villages. Most people there are Muslim that are using it.
And they serve everybody.
Yes, and those centers, even though they're Christians, hire also Muslims. So you create job, you heal the Muslims, and the Christians and Muslims live together. But once again, and I've experienced that myself in the county of Fayoum, where we were celebrating the Epiphany. And suddenly, before Mass, there's those like 18 kind of armed men that came in. And, you know, it's just like, you don't see that often. Right. If you're here in Canada and you go to parish and you see those armed men coming in, says, are they going to do a job on us? No, they were coming to protect the Christians. There was only 200 Christians praying, you know, but they were there for the entire ceremony to protect the Christians, because they know that even the relation is going well, there are a small group of fanatics that would like to do the grand coup. And the same thing with other churches, where actually the military dispatching military trucks and military in front of the big churches when they are a big celebration to protect the Christians. Right. Because that's what those fanatics are looking for. To kill one Christian, that's nothing. But to attack a church and the symbolism of the church, the symbolism of Palm Sunday, of Christmas, the Epiphany, they know it's the heart of Christianity. And they want people to feel that sense of fear. Yeah. But what I saw on the ground is the Christians are, even though they know they're there, they don't fall into that fear, because they know their brother Muslims they work with also are with them. And that's a big strength that they have.
What about this question of security? I mean, I want to talk a little bit about the relationship of the president with the Christian churches a little bit later in the show, but some people would say, well, the government's not doing enough to protect Christians. It should be doing more. I mean, what you just said shows that there is an effort on the part of El-sisi, the president, and the government to support and to protect the local Christian communities. But are they doing enough, or should they be doing more?
Well, right now it's, you know, Egypt is over 90 million people. And so the new government that took place in 2013 with General Sisi has promised to protect the Christian. And he's done a better job at it than any other governments before him. That I can tell you. And even wants to go further. And that's why the Christians, I would say most of the Christians, starting with the Patriarch of the Orthodox Church there, are welcoming and see this general as good news for Egypt, but also for the Christian. And so, yes, more could be done, but it's very hard, especially in rural and Upper Egypt, very difficult. But in big cities, big towns like Alexandria, Cairo, and other parts, they can dispatch forces to protect. But, you know, you can never know when an attack will take place.
Not even in the West or in other countries around the world.
So you cannot do everything. But, but I can tell you the Christians are happy with the way this government is doing everything to protect and really to respect the Christians of Egypt.
I want to ask you about political, social engagement of the Christian communities on the ground in Egypt. We know that the Christians are a minority. I think about 10%, maybe a little bit more than 10% of the Egyptian population. Are they involved in the social, political process? Do they have an influence in that arena?
Well, it's difficult, because the only force, organized force, that counter 30 years of Mubarak rule, you know, the previous president that lost through the revolution in 2011, that was allowed was the Muslim Brotherhood. They were the only organized group, and the Christians were really never allowed to participate fully in the political and economical life. So that institutionalized discrimination basically put aside the Christians' activity. So their life has been mainly to live in their community, creating the best job they could. But compared to other Christians in the Middle East, the Christians of Egypt are always poorer, less educated, living in the outskirts of society. If you go in Cairo, for example, many Christians about 20, 30 years ago found the only place they could live in from the rural areas coming to Cairo in the garbage town. Now if you go, I visited not long ago a big garbage town. They recycle everything from Cairo, and they live on the dump. They have buildings, houses, clinics, churches on the dump. Everything is dumped there. It's hallucinating. But those people live in poverty, and you have kids walking without shoes. They cut themselves. They have people that are injured. This is the Christians living in a situation like this. You would be appalled to see this. But they've managed to find a way to make money, to have a living, and to be a community. So that's the perseverance of the Christians under Mubarak. Now, with Sisi and the new general and the new president of Egypt, he has promised the Christian to have an Egypt that would basically not have that institutionalized discrimination, where Christians will have proper education, they'll be able to have better jobs, they'll be respected as full citizens of Egypt, which is great news. This is why the Muslim Brotherhood and Salafists are really angry, because they don't want the Christians to have an equal term with the Muslim in Egypt. And that's why the attacks you saw on Palm Sunday and others are going to happen. And it might happen even more to destabilize Egypt. So the good news is, yes, this new government is trying everything to really have a new sense, a new democracy that will include Christians.
We have to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll break down Pope Francis's itinerary when he goes to Egypt, April 28th and 29th. What interreligious dialogue might look like with the Muslim authorities in Cairo when he gets there. Stay with us.
Al mio caro fratello Sua Santità Papa Tawadros II, alla Chiesa copta e a tutta la cara nazione egiziana esprimo il mio profondo cordoglio. Prego per i defunti e per i feriti. Sono vicino ai familiari e all'intera comunità. Il Signore converta i cuori delle persone che seminano terrore, violenza e morte, e anche il cuore di quelli che fanno e trafficano le armi.
Welcome back. Today we're looking ahead to Pope Francis's apostolic visit to Egypt, and joining me is Carl Hétu, the National Director of the Catholic Near East Welfare Association here in Canada. Carl, I want to look at the Pope's itinerary, break it down. Very busy schedule when he arrives. A short visit, but a very busy one. He'll be going to this International Peace Conference at the University of Al-Azhar in Cairo, which we know is a significant hub of education, of Muslim thought that has a wide influence. What are you expecting to hear from Pope Francis and from the Grand Imam, who Pope Francis knows, who's obviously representing the Muslim community? What do you expect to hear from them?
One thing is clear is to have those two men meet is already a big step in the right direction. From there on, the fact that they're meeting, the impact of that meeting is very crucial, because the Grand Imam of that university represents really the move forward. They call themselves really the just center, the just society of Islam. And that means they are really looking at an Islam that will be participating in an inclusive and pluralist society, which is exactly against what the Muslim Brotherhood want. This institution, as a school, as a theological, influence a lot of people. And the idea of having the Pope meeting is also another step to have a reconnection between the Vatican and that school. That was broken down a few years ago, if you recall, when Benedict XVI did his theological reflection in Germany, the first year of his papacy, that created a lot of tension between Muslim worldwide. This is basically a reconciliation. It's reformalizing the relationship, which is good news. And it is very much needed that the leader of our church and the leader of that school of thought would meet and reflect on how they can collaborate. Because the collaboration will not just be between those two men, it's going to be between scholars. Scholars from the Vatican, scholars from Egypt that are Christians, scholars from, of course, Egypt and other parts of the Middle East. It doesn't stop there. It means that we're looking at a grand collaboration and dialogue between Islam and the leadership of Islam and also the Vatican, which is very good news in that sense.
A lot is being made of the fact that this center of education, of thought in the Muslim world, Al-Azhar University that the Pope is going to, is moving in that direction. But how realistic is it to think that this university has a profound influence on the wider Muslim world? Is it possible that this message filters down to, you know, the mosques in some of those rural parts of Egypt where more Christians live, or beyond Egypt's borders itself?
Well, you know, Islam is not like our Catholic Church, right? It's not like a pope and a cardinal and the archbishops and the priest. It doesn't work like that at all. And so, of course, imams go there to be trained, to learn, and they go in parishes, not in parishes, but in mosque. And then you have also other imams that are trained in Saudi Arabia with the Wahhabite approach of Sunni, which is a very much Salafist Muslim Brotherhood approach, which is a very pro-reactive, anti-modernity kind of Islam, and that is non-inclusive Islam, where this school of thought is an inclusive Islam. And so what we see happening now is really a clash and this awakening of Islam in the world right now, that like we saw expressed in a very violent form of the Islamic State, for example, or other Al-Qaeda type kind of reaction, is really going against what modernity is about. And there's a lot of leaders worldwide, and we see them here in Canada, we see them in Europe, we see them in the United States, that are well connected with that university to have a modern Islam. That's the only way Islam can survive the future in a peaceful world. And those other kind of Islam believe of the old time of the peak of Islam in the time of the Ottoman Empire, and before that even, the grand moment of Islam, of the Khalifa and all that stuff. What's important here is basically modernity won't stop Islam to grow. Quite the contrary. Islam can grow, can be. And if you talk to many imams that have studied there, they will tell you that there's nothing wrong and there's nothing bad about cohabitating with other Muslims that think differently, or with Christians or with Jews. And actually, the Prophet himself wanted that to happen. The people of the book are to be respected, never to be attacked. Even an imam recently was telling me, reminding me that in the Quran it specifically states that you should not attack your brother Christians. Never. So the people attacking the Christians in Egypt are not representing what the Prophet wanted. And so that's what that school of thought is doing, and that's why the Pope meeting him will certainly have an impact. Of course, it's not going to have a direct impact, it's going to be long term, there's other forces out there, but we have to encourage that. I mean, we really have to encourage it, and the fact that the Pope is going to really do some kind of a roadmap for future collaboration.
It will be a powerful gesture to see the two of them speaking at this conference. I want to turn to the Pope's meeting of another Pope, Pope Tawadros II, who is the head of the Coptic Church in Egypt. Now, the Copts are not in full communion with the Catholic Church. This is a separate Christian church, but an ancient church. It traces its roots all the way back to Jesus, to the 1st century, and Jesus' followers. We just found out recently that they'll be joined in their meeting by another figure, Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople, who is the spiritual head of the Orthodox churches. That's going to be a very powerful meeting as well. What do you expect to hear from Pope Francis, Pope Tawadros, Ecumenical Patriarch? Why is this meeting so significant? I'm
not sure what they'll say, but I can tell you the importance of their meeting. And the importance is Egypt and the Copts from the time of St. Mark to St. Cyril in the 5th century. And the big split, the first split in our church, happened between the Byzantine Empire, which Bartholomew represents, and the Roman Catholic Church. And so there was a big split where the Egyptians were left alone because they didn't agree on the nature. Was Jesus God and divine and human, or it was one? That was the debate then. Now they kind of solve all of that. But Egypt became alone, and for centuries was alone. And this is kind of a premiere, really, to have the leader of Rome, the leader of Constantinople, Bartholomew, and the patriarch of the Coptic Church to be in the same room, dialoguing together. The symbolism and the importance of this historically is unprecedented. Right. So it is very, very important. It means those people understand after a couple of millennia that the only way forward for Christians in the Middle East but worldwide is to work together, is to be, yes, in communion somehow, even though they have their differences and they might not be able to go further than what they're doing now, but the fact that they dialogue, they talk, they construct is a important point. And what will come out of it can only be positive. Positive for the Christian of Egypt, positive for Constantinople, the Greek Orthodox in particular, and also for Rome and the Latin Church.
It's very interesting that we know Pope Francis is very ecumenically minded. He's very much for Christian unity, for that work. And many times he seems like, when the rest of us watch what he's doing, what he's saying, he's the head of the institution. And what's interesting is that the ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew and Pope Tawadros, who our viewers will not know much about because we don't talk a lot about the Copts in Egypt, that they're both very ecumenically minded as well. So what you have is three church leaders who are all a little bit ahead of their own churches, right? And you know a little bit about Pope Tawadros. I mean, how is he coming to the table with this? What does he think about Christian unity?
Our organization at Quinoa, he approached us because he needed support when he was the Archbishop of Alexandria and 300 kilometers in the desert. And he always thought that working ecumenically was the only way to do it. He was renowned for that. And we supported him to build a youth center where they train youth, not just catechesis, but also they give them trades, how to become full citizenship in the middle of the desert so people can become Christians caring for their church. And he believed there cannot be a church without youth. Youth train in catechism of the church, but also in trades. And so he's done that. And the fact that he became the patriarch is a blessing of God. I really believe that. But also, he also knew his ecumenism was not popular because his predecessor was not very ecumenical. He always had a doubt about the West, the doubt about the other churches, because history has shown that unfortunately the Copts have been left down.
Right.
And so maybe Tawadros is taking a risk, but I think it's a good risk. I think that's the way to go forward. And once the meeting with the Pope at that conference and the following in the coming years fruits of those meetings, I think the archbishops and the bishops and the priests of the Coptic Orthodox Church will embark. Right now they're looking, watching, with doubt, not sure. But if things go well, I think we will see quite an interesting dialogue and cooperation between those churches.
We have to take one more break, but when we come back, we'll look at the strategic importance of Egypt in the entire Middle East. You won't want to miss that. Back with Carl Hétu right after this. At Salt and Light Television, we're interested in your perspective. Share your thoughts with us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And watch more episodes of Perspectives, the weekly edition, on our website, saltandlighttv.org/perspectives. Welcome back. Well, Carl, we have a few minutes left, and I want to talk about the strategic importance of Egypt in the Middle East. You believe, and many people believe, that Egypt has a central role to play in the development of the Middle East, the furtherance of modernization, tolerance, religious freedom, these kinds of human rights, going in this direction. Why is Egypt so important?
Well, if we look at the Arab Spring in 2011, when a revolution really from the people themselves started in Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Yemen, Bahrain, Syria, then the downfall in 2003, even before that, of Iraq. What we see happening is really all around Egypt, it's a burning hell. In Libya, it's civil war. If you look in Syria, civil war. In Iraq, civil war. Even though it's caused by Islamic State right now, many unresolved issues there between the Sunni, the Shiites, and the Kurd. It's far from over. You look at Yemen, every day people are starving, it's total hell in there. And so Egypt is important because when there was a democratic election and the Brotherhood, Muslim Brotherhood, won with Morsi in 2013, what we saw happening is, over there was the Islamization of Egypt.
The attempt.
The attempt to bring Egypt to be Islamic at same style as the Taliban, same style as Saudi Arabia. And the army there with General Sisi basically stopped that from happening. Because I'm telling you right now, and most observer of the Egyptian scene will tell you, Egypt was going towards a civil war like in Libya. And that would have had a major impact all over the Middle East, because how can you have a Syria and Egypt in civil war? You cannot have it. You cannot just even imagine the number of refugees, the number of war, the number of crisis it would have caused. And so the importance of Egypt to develop a model, a bit like Lebanon. You know, Lebanon is the only democratic country where Christians are playing a very important political, economical role with the Shiite Sunni, the Shiite Muslim, the Sunni Muslim, the Druze. And it's, even though it's a bit chaotic, it is working. There is peace in Lebanon, of all places. There is peace right now, and the willingness to keep that peace. In Egypt, we're still miles away from that. But clearly, this government, with the aid of partners, is trying to create the environment where there can be the right of citizenship. It happens to move towards modernity. So the economy can thrive. Right now, the economy is at total chaos. So people live in hardship. The International Monetary Fund wants the General Sisi to adapt a structural plan to stop subsidies on food, oil, petroleum. You know what's going to create chaos if they go full force into that in Egypt. And so what you need is economic stability, political stability, in order to create a model that maybe can be working also in Syria, maybe also in Iraq, in other parts. And Jordan is shaking their boots right now, wondering if the terrorism will happen on their soil, which it has started just before Christmas. So the visit of the Pope going there to see the leader of the Grand Imam meeting with him, the leader of the largest, one of the largest Orthodox Church in the world meeting with the Pope, is of symbolic importance, but also it shows the world Egypt is important. The West should pay attention to Egypt. Russia should pay attention to Egypt. Europe should pay attention to Egypt to make sure that it is stable, it is strong. Because right now, you know, Sadat, the president of Egypt in the 1970s, is the first leader who had struck a deal with Israel. Well, there's been peace between Israel and Egypt after decades of wars. Since then, there's been no war between Israel and Egypt. And he was killed for it. And Sadat said, we have to sacrifice ourselves sometimes for the right thing. He knew he was going to be killed. He got killed. And what I see happening here is people like Dr. Tayyib of the Grand University, the Grand Imam of Egypt, is willing to commit like that. I see the Pope, even though there's danger in Egypt, I don't mind, I will go despite maybe my life-threatening moments, I'll go there. I see the Pope of the Coptic Church wanting to be present. And I see all those Christians at the base that are working really hard at having a unity, modernity, human rights. I mean, those are Christian values that for 2,000 years the Christians have spread all over their schools, their clinics. Everything they do is all about modernity, democracy, human rights, freedom of speech. And so they are influencing. The Christians have been and are influencing their brothers and sisters that are Muslims, Druze, or whoever else. Those are cultural values of the Middle East. And so if, for example, Christians disappear from Iraq, disappear from Syria, disappear from Egypt, that means those values of modernity will be gone. And we might move in chaos. And so it's why I see Egypt and the stability of Egypt spreading in a very strong fashion all over the Middle East. It has to be, for the world's sake.
Thank you very much, Carl. We have to leave it at that. Very interesting. We'll wait and see what happens when Pope Francis goes to Egypt. Carl Hétu is National Director of the Catholic Near East Welfare Association here in Canada. CNEWA, as I mentioned, is a papal agency for humanitarian and pastoral support that works through and with the Eastern Catholic churches to identify urgent needs and implement solutions. Their work is a lifeline, really, for the poor throughout the Middle East, but they also work in Northeast Africa, India, and Eastern Europe. And you can learn more about CNEWA and donate to them if you're in Canada at cnewa.ca, or if you're in the United States, cnewa.org. And don't forget to share your thoughts and connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and watch more episodes of Perspectives, the weekly edition, on our website, saltandlighttv.org/perspectives. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon. Take care.